one of the most imaginative and creative directors out there, one who continually brings us to other worlds of various delights and frights, is Tim Burton. Burton has always been a fascinating figure in the film industry, afforded sizable budgets to bring his ideas to life or adapting other stories. His ascent from Disney animator to one of the most recognized directors of modern cinema is quite impressive. And yet he seems oddly underappreciated. Some people think his directing style has gotten old and tired, that he needs to stop adapting stories and change his technique. To be honest, I don't agree with that. I find all of Tim Burton's films have something interesting to offer, and I don't think he's ever made a bad film. He's done a couple films I find mediocre, but even the likes of Planet of the Apes and Mars Attacks have something to offer. So I'm going to defend and also explain why I don't think his films are as similar as immediately assumed. Under the auteur theory, a director usually has a running theme that goes with their work, and in the case of Tim Burton, it's that of the outsider, somebody shunned by society and forced to live in the shadows and escape to a different world more accepting of him. This makes sense when looking at Burton's life, as he never found himself connecting with the other children and the suburban California neighborhood he resided in. This even continued on to his early career at Disney, when his designs for the Black Cauldron were rejected as too weird, and the studio had no idea what to do with his short films, Vincent and Frankenweenie. Looking at Burton's varied protagonists, each one is different and an outsider for unique reasons. Even looking at the characters Johnny Depp has played in Burton's films, they each feel distinct. While Edward Scissorhands prefers to stay hidden away in his house for fear of hurting people, Ed Wood is more outgoing and extrovert, wanting desperately to share his art to the world and embracing the oddballs he becomes friends with. Meanwhile, his Willy Wonka is somebody who would rather stay inside his factory and run it with the Oompa Loompas and not step outside of the walls, but then has to accept reality and find a worthy heir. The most emotional of Burton's outsiders is featured in Big Eyes, with Margaret Keane forced to create her paintings but let her husband take the credit while she sits quietly at home or in the corner. Seeing this take her toll on her is heartbreaking, and her moment of triumph comes when she's finally allowed to get into the spotlight and take Walter to court. This is one of the many examples of Burton's understanding of all the different types of outsiders out there, and the circumstances they find themselves in. One of the other notable aspects of Burton's work is the use of visuals. Burton is an artist himself. I admit to being a fan of his art style, even going back to his sketches, which are definitely original and almost incomparable to other artists. To this day, Burton still draws designs for his films to show his team of artists working on it exactly what he's envisioning for a specific story. While he has his trademarks, like the infamous looping trees and the big-eyed pale characters, Burton will make sure each character feels distinct. Both Alice in Wonderland and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory involve the title characters going from their dreary homes to a more fantastical place. And yet, not only are the motivations of Alice and Charlie very different, so are the worlds they inhabit. Charlie resides in a cold, organized place, with every house, minus his own, neatly designed and structured, and the smoking chimneys of the giant factory at the top of the street. Alice lives in a traditional Victorian setting, almost like something out of a Jane Austen story, while Wonka's factory ends up being this colorful place with a new room at every corner, each taking on a different look, later matched by the corresponding Oompa Loompa song. Burton's Wonderland is a war-torn kingdom, bookended by two imposing castles representing good and evil. I have never seen an ugly Tim Burton film. All of his works are stunning to look at and offer something special in their visuals, whether in the production design, the costumes usually designed by Colleen Atwood, the special effects, and the makeup work. Even Planet of the Apes, which is the least Burton-esque film, is still impressively shot, with Rick Baker's makeup giving the apes a lot more personality than the admittedly average screenplay does. When Burton tackles a period piece and sees a historical time period through his lens, it's always entertaining. An excellent example is Sleepy Hollow, which captures the Dutch colonial setting of Washington Irving's New England while also reflecting the fear of the time and the headless horseman lurking in the woods. Burton also brought a unique spin to 1950s Hollywood in Ed Wood, a harbor town during the 1970s in Dark Shadows, the San Francisco art scene of the 1960s in Big Eyes, and Wales during the Second World War in Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I've brought up a couple of times Burton not repeating himself and making the same film twice, and this is evident in his aversion to sequels. Warner Brothers has been trying for years to get a Beetlejuice sequel off the ground, but Burton is only interested in treading new ground. His initial plan for Beetlejuice 2 was to completely change the setting to Hawaii and make it a parody of 1960s beach movies, with Beetlejuice saving the day by winning a surfing contest. Burton was not even enthusiastic at first about making another Batman film, and then Warner Brothers gave him complete creative control, resulting in the wildly different Batman Returns, which took the character in a twisted direction and had him confront a wacky trio of villains, each with their own neuroses. However, underneath the famously grotesque scenes of the Penguin biting a campaign manager's nose off, there is a running theme exploring dual identities and how this affects Batman, Catwoman, and the Penguin's thought processes. Batman Returns is probably the most Tim Burton-y film he has directed, and I think his greatest technical accomplishment, with every scene a wonder for the eyes, and Danny Elfman's score serving as an operatic masterpiece in its own right. The use of black and white is especially impressive, and while Burton is famous for using those colors, he also understands how to use the full color spectrum. When it was announced Tim Burton would direct a live-action Dumbo movie for Disney, the first thought were the German expressionist images normally associated with the director. However, he has also used color exceptionally well in the likes of Big Fish, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and especially Big Eyes, which takes great inspiration from Margaret Keane's paintings to create the on-screen depiction of San Francisco during that time period. The combination of Tim Burton and Dumbo, I think, definitely deserves more curiosity than derision for how he'll depict the flights of that elephant and the circus he resides in. Burton has also gotten flack lately for mostly making adaptations, which is odd because he's not the only noted director who takes most of his inspiration from pre-existing stories and puts his personal stamp on them. Stanley Kubrick would do the same thing, holed up in his library for weeks, going through books and trying to find a story to adapt into a movie. Burton seems to select his next project through similar means, when studios send him scripts and concepts. The contempt people had towards Tim Burton adapting Charlie and the Chocolate Factory due to the existence of a previous film version was particularly undeserving. I'm of the opinion that every book should be adapted at least twice, maybe 20 years after the previous version, because it's interesting to see more than one interpretation of the same work and also satisfy those unimpressed with the previous take. Imagine if Peter Jackson thought, I want to make a film based on The Lord of the Rings, but oh, Ralph Bakshi already made one. We would not have gotten one of the best film trilogies of all time. And while Burton was open about his dislike for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, he also expressed his understanding that there would be those who preferred that adaptation. In an interview for the Los Angeles Times, he said, and I quote, "There are people who love Willy Wonka, but it's such a different type of movie. It's not to me a classic. That will upset some people because they love that original movie, but that's fine. It's available on DVD at your local video store." This is just somebody who had a different idea of how to approach Roald Dahl's classic book, and in my opinion, he created the quintessential Chocolate Factory adaptation, but hey, not everybody is going to agree with that sentiment. People are constantly talking about how Tim Burton should change up his directing style and do different things, but while it's good for filmmakers to think outside the box and try different things, I'm also of the opinion that directors should do what makes them the most comfortable. Would you want Dave Fincher to make a light-hearted Kate Hudson romantic comedy? No, that's clearly not in his interest, judging by his past work. Burton was notably not fond of working on Planet of the Apes, where he was restricted in what he was allowed to do, and that's why the final film doesn't feel like something with his touch. And don't we like directors for their style and approaches to the material? Wasn't that disappointment over, say, Edgar Wright leaving Ant-Man because of I want to see him apply his trademark aesthetic to a Marvel superhero film. Even Stanley Kubrick gave AI, artificial intelligence, to Steven Spielberg because he didn't think he would be able to handle the more sentimental and emotional parts of the story as well as Spielberg would. In conclusion, not every Tim Burton film is going to win you over. I myself, like I said, am not particularly fond of Mars Attacks and Planet of the Apes. And hey, his style is not for everyone. But I find myself greatly anticipating all of his future projects, curious how he'll adapt a pre-existing story or take on a biographical one. His visual imagination is one I'm continually awed by. His collaborations with some of the best designers in the industry always produces something special. And his continuing support of the outsider and wanting to tell their stories is one I commend. Whether a Batman lurking in the shadows, a filmmaker just wanting to make the best movies possible even if nobody wants them, a young boy going on an amazing journey to a chocolate factory, a father telling his fantastical stories to his cynical son, or a child using his love for monster movies as inspiration for bringing his dog back to life. All manage to tap into the mind of Tim Burton, and that's a brain I enjoy venturing into. See you next time.